Okay, I just gotta say it. Why do so many people leave the bridge to go and scream at people who might be dying in the transporter room? This is not the first time it's happened, and dear God, people, stop leaving the bridge in the middle of a situation. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the season premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, this episode titled Broken Circle. The Broken Circle? Broken Circle. One of the two. Anywho, let's get into this review. I am so freaking excited to talk about the latest season of Strange New Worlds with all of you, but before we get started, I will just say that while I am recording this review before I have seen the entirety of the season, I'm watching every episode as it goes, and then giving my review after I watch the episode, I actually, probably by the time you are watching this, have released my review of the first 6 episodes of the season in a non-spoiler review, because I was sent the first 6 episodes of the season via screeners, so that video should already be up, even though I haven't, as of this filming, made it yet. So go check that out if you want my thoughts on the entirety of the season. But just to let everyone know, I have not yet seen any of the rest of the season as of the time of this recording. So if you're worried about future spoilers, don't worry, I will not reveal anything. But that being said, let's talk about this episode specifically, and as per usual, I'm going to stay spoiler-free up front, and then I'll give you a quick little, hard line when I'm going to go into spoilers and talk specifics about the episode. So, staying spoiler-free, what I will say is, while I really enjoyed this episode quite a lot, there was a lot of stuff that I thought was really fun, and actually a lot of bold choices. Yeah, bold is the word I'm going to use, because that's a Star Trek word, right? I could use bold? Why did I hesitate on that? I don't know, stop judging me. Anyways, there's some bold choices in this season premiere. That being said, I do think that this is a weaker episode for me, mostly because I feel like there's a lot of decisions made in this episode that are done to facilitate action beats rather than character work or plot, that I found in a way to kind of be just sort of sitting there being like, this is kind of dumb and stupid. And to me, a lot of it read like the choices were done to give this premiere a sort of action heavy focus, because if they started off the premiere with kind of the sort of cliffhanger from season 2, or season 1 I should say, where we sort of have Una arrested for having been an Illyrian and lied about her application to Starfleet, then that would have been like a courtroom drama episode, which, you know, to some suit sitting at CBS or Paramount or whatever probably reads like, you want to start your season off with a courtroom drama? That's dumb. Do something fun and actiony to get people in. And so this is the episode that came out of that sort of impetus of let's make an action-heavy episode in order to get the season starting off with a lot of excitement. And as a result of that impetus, I feel like there are decisions made here that are meant to facilitate more of that action orient rather than to facilitate intriguing plot and characters. That to be said, that's not to say there isn't good character beats or good story here. There definitely is, and there's a lot of stuff that I like about it. But that being said, I do feel like they were a lesser priority than the action, and at some points that led me to be a little bit disappointed with some of those moments. Now, I am starting off with some big negatives, but let me talk some general positives before I get into specifics here, though. I love that they chose to do this episode as an Anson Mount light episode. And that's not really a spoiler, it sort of comes in the beginning of the episode. And I say that as someone who adores Anson Mount. I love him to death. He is probably one of my favorite parts of this whole season. Have you seen his hair? What more do you want from a person besides this wonderful charisma? But it is really cool for this season to say, hey, this lead actor, we're actually going to put him off to the side a little bit and focus on the rest of our crew and ensemble and give them a moment to shine in the premiere episode of the season. That's a very bold choice, and one that I think shows a lot of confidence in the show to center its other actors. And they well deserve centering because they're all amazing and they do a phenomenal job here. I think most especially Ethan Peck gets some really great moments to shine in this episode. La'an as well gets a chance to sign Nurse Chapel. Also gets a few great moments as well. And Benga as well. Everyone just gets little tiny moments throughout this that I think they all really do an excellent job with. On top of that, just because it's probably already been in the trailers and stuff like that, this is the episode that deals with the Klingons. And obviously we get the original Klingon look instead of the remade Star Trek Discovery Season 1 look, which a lot of people did not like. I didn't love them, but I also didn't hate them as vitriolically as others, but I do like the original Klingon looks, and I think they look really, really awesome. And also, that being said, said, given that we are dealing with Klingons, the other thing that I liked this episode for was it dealt with the ramifications of Star Trek Discovery Season 1, which was the Klingon War. And here, while we're not in the Klingon War anymore, we're starting to see some of the effects, both large and small, on the setting of Star Trek in this sort of post-Klingon War era, in a way that we haven't really gotten a ton of chance to see, and I really liked this episode dealing with those ramifications. So that was a lot of fun to see that connection to Star Trek Discovery in a really cool and fun way. So overall, I like this episode. I by no means think it's bad by any means, but I do think it is one of the weaker episodes that I've seen of the show compared to season 1. But let's hope that the rest of the season continues on upward trajectory, because the pilot episode of season 1 was also not my favorite of that season. I still like that episode a lot, but it wasn't my favorite, and so let's just see where the rest of the season goes. But that being said, let's get into spoilers to talk all of the fun nitty-gritty of this episode. So if you have not seen it yet, get off ship here, because we're stealing the Enterprise to talk spoilers. Alright, I got my handy dandy notebook here, so we're going to go through the episode beat by beat because there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We start off the episode with the sexy VFX shot. Some VFX artist was either having a headache or a field day with that shot. It was really cool to see. I loved it. And we do learn that we are a few months after the end of season 2. La'an's sort of off the station. Una's still dealing with her trial, and they're all sort of like on leave right now getting repairs at the starbase. And we cut over to Pike dealing with Una, and I feel like this is just a touch base for what will probably be coming in episode 2, which is the trial episode of the season, focusing on Una. So this is just sort of a like getting that storyline, just like, yes, we know it's coming, don't worry, we will return to it, but we wanted to tell a different story with our premiere. And this does cause Pike to sort of head off to try and maybe go get a new lawyer for Una who can help her out. So curious to see where that's going to go in episode 2, but it felt more like a sort of box tick. But this does lead Spock in as captain of the Enterprise, which is interesting to me on a number of levels when I heard this, because like this might be technically Spock's first time captaining the Enterprise canonically, which he does end up being the captain of the Enterprise eventually in Star Trek 6, I believe, and he does captain it a few times throughout the original series, so this being his first canonical time captaining Enterprise, that's kind of cool to sort of get that official first moment. I thought that was kind of awesome. But what was interesting to me is I thought that this, and maybe this is my expectation, was going to be an episode about Spock in a leadership position, kind of akin to Galileo 7, one of the seminal episodes of the original series that was about like Spock's leadership role as a Vulcan, and what that sort of meant for his leadership style.
Is increasingly hostile.
My tone is the only thing that's hostile, Mr. Spock.
Curious. Most illogical.
And I'm sick and tired of your logic.
We could use a little inspiration.
And I thought that that's what this episode was going to be, considering this is kind of a momentous canonical moment with Spock taking over the Enterprise. But sadly, that really wasn't the case. The episode was more focused on Spock's emotion and internal life rather than his external stuff going on. So maybe that was just a rejiggering my perspective on it. But I was sort of like, oh, I was hoping for that sort of aspect of it. But by no means a bad way to go with the story. Speaking of Spock's internal world, though, I loved this because we go down to the med bay and Spock is talking with Mbenga. And Mbenga's sort of saying, well, you've broken down these Vulcan cognitive blocks when Hemmer died. And so now you're sort of more exposed to emotions in a way that a lot of Vulcans aren't. And this was a weird way of describing Vulcan emotions to me, but it's like one of those like, okay, I get it. Like, Vulcans put up cognitive blocks so they do have stronger emotions. That we already kind of knew. The cognitive block part was something that's, I think, new to canon, that there's these walls that they put up that they can like take down if they attack them hard enough. I'm not sure if I'm in love with it, but I don't hate it either. But what I did love was Mbenga's decision to say, well, one way you could help deal with your emotions is by playing music, and he gives him the Vulcan lyre, which is the instrument that Spock plays in the original series, which I thought was beautiful, like a really beautiful way to sort of add new context to why Spock plays the lyre in the original series. I just really liked this idea of Spock uses it to help him deal with, you know, his emotions, and to soothe himself.
Starship Enterprise.
I thought that this is when I love nostalgia for, when you use it to add context that increases the original work, rather than sort of just like does the same thing again, or is just sort of a sort of repetition, or even kind of a downgrade of the original work. This is a way that enhances that original reading in a way that I think is really, really cool. I loved this. Hands down, a really great idea. But then we get to also see that Spock still has a little bit of resistance with Nurse Chapel, because he still feels kind of probably some emotions underneath her, as we see later on in the episode, and they're both kind of awkwardly handling it at the moment. And Nurse Chapel is potentially considering leaving the Enterprise for a Vulcan fellowship for a little while, probably to get away from Spock, but it also seems like an interesting career move. We then get a fun little beat with like Ortegas and Uhura sort of dealing with these people coming on the ship, telling them how to run their stations. Like, no, we got our shit, we know what we're doing. Just a fun little beat. That being said, I am sure some of the like anti-SJW folks are gonna be like, oh, this is them showing that the women hate the men and they're trying to mansplain. This show hates men, is probably gonna be the take. My bet would be using this scene as evidence, which is dumb, but I like the scene. I thought it was cool. From here, though, Uhura gets a message from La'an about there potentially being a Federation threat on this sort of dilithium planet that the Klingons and the Federation sort of have split usage of after the war, which is an interesting sort of setup, because I like this idea that there's this planet that's like disputed, and so part of the treaty was like, we split it, we take resources half and half, we sort of own it at a certain point. I think that comes from like there's a comic book series that did that way back in the day. I thought it was just an interesting sort of usage of that idea. And April says to Spock, no, you can't go. We have to wait. We have to respect the treaty. We do not want to start another war. And as we learn later on, this is because April's a little bit hesitant about starting up aggressions with anybody, because that means that there might be fighting a battle on two fronts, considering the Gorn are also increasing their aggression, sort of following that storyline from season 2. So I thought that was a good little like subtle background emotion for April here. But then Spock decides to steal the Enterprise. And this is one of the things where I'm sort of like, I wish we had gotten more of a character beat with this, instead of it just being like, yeah, let's steal the Enterprise right now. Because while I do agree that this is a choice Spock could make, we're going to go after La'an, this seems like the smart choice, you know, stealing the Enterprise is something that, like, is always, like, a big deal in any of the stories that it's told in. And here it's sort of kind of done perfunctorily, and Spock's just like, yeah, we're going to do it. And then everyone's like, yeah, we're in on this. There's not like, a big, like, decision moment or, like, or anyone questioning Spock's choice or anything like that. And I'm not saying that it needed to go any differently in terms of the plot beats, but I just wish there had been a little bit more time spent here, because this stealing the Enterprise seems like a much bigger deal than this moment made it out to be, especially for Spock, given that it's his first time captaining the Enterprise, and his first action is going to be an insubordinate act and stealing a whole starship. I don't know, it just felt a little bit like, I wish we had spent more time on this choice, rather than it kind of being a little bit of like perfunctory yada yada yada, we're gonna go out. And this kind of goes to what I was saying in my spoiler-free section. It's not bad, I don't hate it, but it does feel like the choice made for action's sake rather than for like the character or story's sake. But this sequence does lead us to finally meet Kane, who is coming on the ship as, in this episode, is sort of someone just overseeing the refit of the Enterprise, but we do learn she does become the new chief engineer by the end of the episode, and I adore her. I love that she's like, number one, so easily able to call out that they're stealing the Enterprise. She gets it immediately. She's like, yeah, I know what's going on here. And I love that she's like, kind of into it. She's like, I'm just like, I know what's going on. I'm just calling it as it is. And, you know, probably have a good reason. This seems like fun. I'm in. I loved all of that, and Carol Kane is just having a lot of fun with it and like playing around with Spock a little bit. It's like, ooh, a Vulcan with a hunch, interesting. And it kind of goes to like Spock not being a typical Vulcan, which is kind of a theme reiterated throughout the episode. So I loved all of that. I thought this was just a great introduction to her character. I am so excited to see where she's going to go with this season. Oh, and it also is worth mentioning she name drops Amanda Grayson, Spock's mom, and then she also mentions that she's like 100 years old or something like that, and we do learn later on in the episode she's, as Uhura called her, a Lanthanthian, which is a species that apparently is new. I looked it up, but I couldn't find them, so if someone tells me that they're from like a book or something, I didn't catch it. But apparently they lived on Earth with humans, but didn't reveal themselves. So it kind of reminds me of like Elorians, like Guinan from Next Generation. So I'm gonna be curious to see where they go with that. And actually, it'd be interesting if like she knows Guinan, and they even bring back not Whoopi Goldberg, but the actor who they had play Guinan in Star Trek Picard season 2. If we get like a flashback episode or something, that would actually be kind of cool. If we get like Carol Kane and Guinan sort of interactions, that'd be actually That'd be kind of fun. I hope they're setting that up. That would be a fun little crossover, actually. But we do have the Enterprise eventually getting stolen, and they start to head off to the planet. I will say there is this joke that is made where Spock kind of has to have his thing, whether he says hit it or engage or whatever our captain says to make the ship go to warp. And I'm gonna be honest here. This joke worked for me because it worked with like Spock saying something silly and dumb. It's like, I want the ship to go now. That got a chuckle out of me. That being said, this joke needs to die. Every single Star Trek show, modern Star Trek show, except for maybe Star Trek Prodigy, has done this joke at this point.
Writing the opening line to your legacy. So then, what will it be?
We're done with it. Don't do it again. It's over. Let it die. The like, oh, the captain needs to decide his thing bit, we're good with. It's done. It's done. It's done. Stop it, Star Trek. I love you, but stop.
To execute, hit it, and manifest.
Manifest?
Nobody likes that one.
Hit it was Captain Parks.
Sometimes someone needs to sit you down and let you know that you have a problem. Like an intervention for Star Trek to stop making the same joke. Oh god, yeah, it's a joke that does need to die now. This is the last one. You gotta chuckle. Stop. We then arrive at this dilithium planet, and of course La'an is drinking a Klingon under the table. Love that for her. Makes sense. I adore it. And I also, like I said before, I love the look of the new Klingons. They look just like the Next Generation DS9 Voyager Klingons, but updated a little bit with like a little bit of the Discovery aesthetic to them. So I thought this was a great look to them. And this is coming from someone who did not hate the Season 1 Discovery look. Didn't love it, but didn't hate it either. Then we have our crew meeting up with La'an. I did like this reunion, like Mbenga doing the little under eye thing and just like them connecting again and everyone being happy to see each other. I thought this was a great little way to get La'an back to the crew. We learned that she was like helping Ariana find her family, which she did find on this planet, and then it sort of led to a larger conspiracy that she's uncovered that she wants everyone's help with to figure out what's going on with. So that all made sense to me, and it was a sort of a nice way to say like this is what La'an was doing over the last few months. We also have Mbenga and Nurse Chapel going to help Ariana's parents, but then getting captured by these Klingons. And then we also have La'an going to meet with these Klingons to sell them Federation weapons. And I have to say, like, the cut to where La'an was meeting these Klingons on this sort of, like, red hellscape, I'm like, oh my god, I guess they're meeting them on planet Hell. Like, when did this planet suddenly become, like, fucking, like, the Underdark or some shit, you know? It was just kind of like a wild, like, transition for me. And La'an sort of doing this handoff meet was kind of fun and sort of standing just like, here's a few weapons, I'm not gonna give you too many. I will say I was a little bit confused now having seen the whole episode about why these Klingons needed the Federation weapons. Maybe it was just to stockpile it to make it look good for the Klingons, like, oh, here's a bunch of weapons on there. But the connection was not 100% explicit or clear for me why they needed the Federation weapons from La'an, especially if they were going like tomorrow. Yeah, it was just a little bit awkward for me it felt a little bit forced to try and have this action beat because I wasn't exactly sure the connection. We also, during this sequence, meet our new transporter chief, who is a non-binary actor, which is awesome, at least according to my looking up. I may have gotten that wrong, but I think the actor is non-binary, which is awesome. It is funny that all of our transporter chiefs need to be twinks, apparently, so I thought that was funny. But cool to see a new transporter chief. Apparently, the actor who played the last transporter chief last season couldn't come back for whatever reason. So cool to see a new actor. We also then head over to what I'm calling Discovery Sick Bay, because it's very clearly they're using the set of Discovery Sick Bay from Star Trek Discovery for this sequence, but it is meant to be a sick bay on another Federation ship, the one that the Klingons have captured and are going to be using for their false flag event, and they're forcing Mbenga and Nurse Chapel to help us heal the Klingons. I liked this beat on a character level because we got to learn that Mbenga and Chapel both still have a little PTSD from their time during the Klingon War, and I liked learning a little bit of those scars in a way that we hadn't really got to see a lot of both in Discovery and Strange New World Season 1. So I'd like to see this particular time period coming off of Discovery Season 1 is being used to explore that. And so I thought that was cool. What was less cool for me, and this is kind of, again, where I'm going to the bit about, like, this episode didn't work for me as much, and this is the big reason why, is the beat where apparently Mbenga and Chapel take this drug to kind of give themselves superpowers to be able to fight Klingons. And the reason being is, like, this is a drug, apparently, that they used during the Klingon War to enhance themselves. I have a few problems with this on a few different levels. One, this drug has never come up before, so it's just kind of weird that it's just sort of brought up during this moment to sort of like just give this backstory to these characters, and it reads just more like, oh, we need a reason for Chapel and Mbenga to be able to logistically beat up a whole bunch of Klingons, because like why would either of them be able to do that? They're both doctors, so we'll like give them this drug that'll like yada yada that, so we can have those action beats. So it just feels weird to have never brought it up before, and it feels like it's just there to just like explain why these characters are being able to beat up a bunch of Klingons. And number two, on top of that, watching them beat up a bunch of Klingons, I thought was kind of weird looking. I don't know, it was weird watching two doctors just beat up a bunch of like seasoned warriors, and even if there was this explanation, it was one of those like, I didn't need to see this. I would much rather them like sneaking around or something, and it felt again like the show wanted to have like the action beat in a way that just didn't read right to me. It just felt weird. I was just kind of like laughing and kind of like uncomfortable during the whole, because it just didn't feel right for these characters to be doing that. Not like I have an ethical problem with it, but it's just like, I don't know, I just was like, I didn't want these two characters to be the one beating up a bunch of Klingons. It's a weird choice. And then the third thing with this too is that like, while it is technically not genetically modifying yourself, it is something different. It is weird that the Federation like enables the use of this drug to like fight Klingons and like enhance your abilities, and then presumably next episode we're going to be dealing with a trial of someone like who had their like body genetically modified. It just feels like a weird like hypocritical thing, which if addressed is an interesting issue, but otherwise feels a bit weird. So like this whole beat I did not like, and it dragged the episode down actually a significant amount for me, because it just threw me off this entire time, and it felt like a very unforced error, to be quite frank. That being said, it does lead to Mbenga and Nurse Chapel being able to send a signal to the Enterprise that this ship is going to be used for a false flag event. And then we have Spock on the Enterprise seeing a D7 battlecruiser, which was sexy as all hell. Love seeing that. I love seeing like the guns coming out of like the ship's engine sides. That was really cool. But then realizing, oh, this is what's going on, so he tries to stop the other ship. He eventually does, but it does cause Nurse Chapel and Mbenga to have to shoot themselves into space. And Spock, for a moment, thinking that both of them had died, and more specifically, Nurse Chapel had died. And we get to see that moment with Spock, like, kind of breaking down and having emotions for Nurse Chapel, building off his feelings for her, which I'll be excited to see if how that's sort of interwoven with the T'Pring storyline later on, and it ties into, like, where Spock's at as a character right now. So I loved that beat for him. And I loved them saving them at the last moment. The thing I liked less, and again, this is one of those like there's sort of like an action emotion beat over like logic, which is like Spock apparently left the bridge during a moment where they're possibly facing down a D7 battlecruiser to go and like worry about Nurse Chapel. And I get emotionally this works as like an emotional beat of like him needing to resolve like, oh, I have feelings for Nurse Chapel and she's gonna have to see that, and we're gonna have to deal with that over the next rest of the season. That being said though, it is a bit awkward because it's like, Spock, you're a captain, you're in this situation, you should not be leaving the bridge. So I just like this, and it's again one of those moments of this episode where it's like, it takes the like quick moment to be able to tell the story that it wants to tell, rather than logically what the situation would be. And I just did not like it as much, even though I liked the emotional beat. But this does lead to a fun beat where Spock then does speak with the Klingon captain, and the captain's like, Vulcan drinking blood wine, and we just get this fun beat where Spock is drinking blood wine with the Klingons and goes, rah! I loved all of that. That was wonderful. And then Spock being hung over the next day with April, who just sort of lets him off the hook, I thought was great, and again, alluding to the Gorn stuff going on. We also get a quick little beat with Kane and Spock, which was great, and him like kind of having a little bit of a fandom over her, and her saying like, I love her beat was like, oh, the worst thing is boredom. I got bored. I want to have some fun. You guys seem fun. So that was great, and her again name dropping that Amanda was the person who helped her. I also liked the phrasing of her coming out. She said, tell the person who I came out to. So clearly they're using a little bit of the language of queer people to sort of relate to Kane's story of like coming out of the closet, of being this species living on Earth that no one knew. There's very clear like queer vibes there. So I'm curious to see how that storyline is going to get evolved further, if they are going to sort of maybe draw some parallels to a queer experience. experience through Carol Kane's character. We'll see how that goes, but something I definitely picked up on the wording of there, so I'll be curious to keep my eye on that. Beyond all of that, though, we do end the episode with Spock worried about Nurse Chapel. Again, sort of this potential emotional arc that he's going to have with Nurse Chapel. I'm curious to see where that's going to go. I am just to give my brief thoughts on it, I actually, while I was initially not here for the sort of Nurse Chapel to Pring love romance story when I first thought about it in season 1, the more I've liked it since, because I like these 3 actors' interpretations of those characters, and while it may not one-for-one match up with where those characters appear in the original series, whether that be Spock, Chapel, or T'Pring, I'm curious to see how they end up getting there, and I like these 3 characters' performances enough, and how they play this story arc, that I like it, even though there's a part of me as like a Trekkie is like, this doesn't necessarily read one-for-one with the original series, and also sort of like having Nurse Chapel's arc be sort of about Spock, is also one of those things like, oh, the woman character has to be about Spock, but there's enough like women characters on this show as well, and Nurse Chapel does have other stuff going on that I'm willing to be like, okay, let's see where they go with this, and I am kind of curious to see where it goes. So excited about all of that, and the episode does end on a wonderful ode to Nichelle Nichols, who obviously played Uhura and passed away between season 1 and 2 of this show, so that was really wonderful and sweet to see. So that's my thoughts on this episode premiere overall. I liked it. There's a lot I really loved about it, specifically like things like Carol Kane and some of the acting moments. But I do think that there are a couple of like logical stuff that is bringing the episode down in terms of it being a little bit more action focused than storytelling focused, in a way that sort of made this one a little bit lower on my list of episodes of this series so far. So not the strongest premiere, but by no means a bad one. That being said, I am very excited to see what episode 2 is going to bring, because presumably we're going to be dealing with Una and her trial. So excited to see all of that. But beyond that, thank you all so much for joining me for this review, and I look forward to talking to you next week. But until then, my friends, live long and make the ship go. Now,